What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Corporate Bartender. We are closing out 2022 here at TCB with a banger. This is hands down one of my favorite episodes of the year. So grab onto those handles above your seat and hang on, because we've got Carla Fowler on the program today. If you don't know Carla, this is a holiday gift for you because she kind of rules. She's an MD, Ph.D. with a passion for performance science. She's the founder of Thaxa Executive Coaching and uses her secret sauce performance science formula to help organizations from startups to the Fortune 50. She's a graduate of Brown University, got her MD, Ph.D. at the University of Washington, and completed her surgical residency at Stanford. She's an amazing person. Her approach is new, different, and fills a gap in the executive coaching space that is unique. This conversation was a blast, and I think you're going to dig it. So buckle up, TCBers, grab your favorite cocktail, and let's get right on into it with Carla Fowler on today's TCB.
Welcome to SkyTeam's The Corporate Bartender, where we gather some of the best HR and people leaders to discuss what's happening on the people side of business. Now pull up a stool, belly up to the bar, and join us for The Corporate Bartender.
All right. Well, let's get on into it, everybody. It is Wednesday. It's your favorite day and my favorite day. It's Corporate Bartender Day. It is the 14th of December, 2022, and this is episode number 152. I say it every time. Holy cow, it's December. Christmas is coming up really quick. Ruby and I were in Washington, D.C. last week, so Lori was on her own. Thank you, Lori, for covering for my absence. Ruby and I were setting up for a workshop in D.C., and I had the music going, and it was the Christmas cocktail jazz list from Spotify that you just heard in the background. And Ruby gives me this kind of annoyed look, and she's like, "Why are you playing Christmas music?"
I'm not a fan anyway, but yeah.
And I was like, have you looked at a calendar lately? She's
it
like,
is a
damn
tonic.
it. She's like, I haven't done anything. Which made me feel better because I had done very little things. So I felt really accomplished in that moment. Oh, today's going to be a fun day. We've got a guest. You can see the strange person in your Brady Bunch view here, Dr. Carla Fowler. She's an MD, PhD, elite executive coach. And for the last decade or so, she has been a secret weapon for a ton of CEOs, entrepreneurs, and other senior leaders. What's her angle, you ask? Performance science. She combines the latest research from performance science with timeless best practices to help top performers level up and achieve their goals. Spoiler alert, she might be something of what we might call an overachiever. She graduated from Brown University, magna cum laude. She earned her MD and PhD at UW, and she completed her internship for surgery at Stanford. So not slacky schools. She's kind of killing it here. So Carla's going to talk to us about performance science. What is it? How do we use it in our jobs at work? How do we use it to help improve ourselves? So let's give Carla a big TCB welcome, everybody, shall we? Welcome, Carla.
Thanks, Eric.
Good to see you. We're going to get into a conversation with her, but first, I have to pimp my book. Please tell your friends, buy the book. We're into holiday gift giving mode, and it makes a fantastic holiday gift. I promise. There we go. So if you have not bought one, buy one. If you have bought one, buy one for a friend. Buy one for your team. Buy one for somebody that you don't like. That's fine too. We've got some guests upcoming. Thais Gibson is going to be with us. We're in the midst of rescheduling that. She was supposed to join us a couple of weeks ago, and we had to reschedule. We've got our first 2023 guest, Dr. Corey Rosen. He's on the 18th of January. He's the author of Ownership, Reinventing Companies, Capitalism, and Who Owns What. That seems like that will be a pretty fun conversation as well. As always, we start with a little news item. And today, this one grabbed me. It came out in HBR just a couple of days ago. And it's on mindfulness. And, we've talked a lot about that here. And like motherhood, apple pie, and rock and roll, it seems like a good thing. But apparently, some new studies are coming out saying it's not always the best thing because it's not a one size fits all topic, right? I mean, it's one of those things that seems good at its core in all circumstances. And there's a slight angle that is popping out in research, depending on the type of mindfulness meditation practices you choose. So generally speaking, mindfulness is a great way to reduce stress and improve well-being. But there are essentially two camps, and there were a couple of different studies that are referenced in this article. One, the first one was with IT consultants and call centers in India and the US. And this is the sort of upside story. They found that workers who meditated in the morning were more attentive and helpful to their coworkers and customers throughout the day. And basically any sort of meditation made them a little bit more helpful. But it really depended on what they used to the degree that it was effective. So there are two types: breath-based meditation, where you focus on your breath and breathing. Those seem to help people better understand other perspectives cognitively. And then there's loving kindness meditation, where you imagine sending kindness and goodwill to others. I call that the good juju. And that made people more able to feel what others were experiencing, boosting empathy. So I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. So one is cognitive and one is more empathetic. But then there was another study of over 1,400 online gig workers. And what they learned with that one was breath-focused meditation practices may do more harm than good. So the loving kindness bucket of meditative practices shift your focus to other people and generally increase your feelings of empathy toward other people. And breathing meditation is focusing on yourself. And what they learned was that effectively reduces guilt, thus decreasing motivation to make amends for past wrongs and or ability to or willingness to feel empathy for other people. Ruby's shaking her head.
Yeah,
Ruby, you're not buying it? You're not buying it, or does it just make you sad?
Not buying it.
Hey,
the unskeptical person is skeptical of this one.
Wow.
No.
So I figured, we've got a scientist in the house. We would just ask Dr. Carla Fowler what she thinks about this. We talked a little bit about it in the pre-show. Carla, what's your take here on this article?
I think it probably points out, just to go to the skepticism, is that there's a lot of this is really hard to measure. So that is thought number one. I think my take, as I'm just thinking about what I know, and is that a lot of times you need to think about what's the context you're using something in, and maybe what would be most helpful. And so, of course, I know headlines are meant to make us click on something. Right.
Even at HBR.
I know. I think a lot of kinds of meditation and even the different effects they saw from these different things are really useful. Because it's kind of saying, well, where are we putting our attention? And that whatever we're paying attention to really kind of grows for us. And so to me, it just says mindfulness is awesome. And it is more versatile than we thought it was. Not that it doesn't work. And so my thought was I don't know, have you ever met people who their struggle is not with empathy? For example, they're very empathetic. In fact, maybe the problem is they're feeling oh man, I gotta really help everybody, and everyone's having so many problems. Or man, I feel I really need some time for myself, but I don't, but a friend just called or a colleague called and they really need help with a thing. And so this thought of being able to care for your own needs isn't a selfish thing, but it strikes me that in that circumstance, focusing on your breath, thinking about yourself, your own kind of care and what you need might be really strengthening for people who are finding themselves in that situation. I don't know. So that's what I was thinking about, was mindfulness is awesome and versatile.
I just love your flip on the headline, right? I mean, I would be more inclined to click on the positive, encouraging headline. But this one intrigued me. And I thought, just like Ruby with the skepticism, I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't work? Come on, let's see what this says.
Well, it's because it made me think, Carla, when you were talking about that, we talk a lot because it's a recurring theme about boundaries, and that boundaries are not selfish. They're critical for being able to care for other people. And so that's what I always think about in terms of when I think of mindfulness. Some of it is that like loving kindness and compassion focused work, but it's also about getting centered in yourself and what you need so that you can be healthy in the way you're trying to help, and not being, run over by your empathy, because that can happen.
This is the empathy steamroller.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know that I'm meant to be a flat little sideline here to everyone else's pain. So, yeah.
I love it. And it's funny. So Carla, just so you know, we do push on some of that skepticism. We've sort of reframed quiet quitting around here as healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
I think I heard that. I was listening to one of your other shows. I think that came up. It was awesome.
You're like, wait, I'm not going to be a victim to an 80-hour work week anymore. Okay.
Yeah. Last week when Twitter turned some of their empty offices into makeshift hotel rooms so that overworked employees could just sleep there, I thought, that is not healthy, man. That is not healthy boundaries. And then I read that the city of San Francisco was investigating them for violating code.
I'm just laughing because I remember the day I got the tour for my internship at Stanford for like general surgery residency. And they're like, here's the room where we have Google Nap pods. Do you guys know what these are? Yeah. Okay. I will tell you, I never saw the inside of one of those nap pods. Never.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of time for residents to sleep.
Oh, goodness. Anyways, that's what I'm reminded of.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Carla, welcome to the program. We are so happy to have you here. As we mentioned in the open, right? MD, PhD, elite executive coach, focused on performance science. You run a coaching practice, called Thaxa?
Yes.
Is that how you say it? Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. So we want to know all about performance science. What does it mean? How do we use it? How did you find yourself doing this work? So that's where we start. Tell us a little bit about your story, your backstory, how you got here. I don't imagine that when you were but a child, you dreamed of being on this program one day and being a subject matter expert in the area of performance science.
No, but I probably should have dreamed on being on this program because it's pretty fun. I did not. I didn't even dream of being a doctor. I think the honest truth is that the thing that has always gotten me sort of where I've gone has been, I love learning things and I really like challenges. Like I really like figuring out if I can do something hard when I see it. And I think a piece of that was just this thought of like, well, I feel better when I feel capable. And apparently I needed to like prove it to myself that I could do something before I would say, okay, I can do that thing. So
let me pause you because I was listening to some of your other appearances in prep and I heard you tell a story and I think it would be fun for you to tell that story here.
Okay.
That when you were but a child, you were doing some self-imposed training for the presidential physical fitness test.
Oh, yes. Is that something? Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and from what I remember, I think you were describing the shuttle run, right? Where you run back and forth with the bean bags. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So tell us what you did.
Tell the story.
And how old you were.
Okay, I'm seeing clapping, which makes me think other people remember this like 5th grade torture device. Well, I grew up right by my elementary school, so I was able to like walk back and forth. And I think 5th grade is like the earliest that I remember thinking like, oh, there's like this thing that has a measurement and an award associated with it. And I want to meet the mark. And I was totally stumped by the shuttle run. I mean, like the hanging was really hard. There was an all-out sprint that was pretty straightforward. There was like reach and touch your toes. So like many things were straightforward because I was kind of an active kid. But like the changing directions, like I just was like, this is not working. And so I was like, okay, I guess I need to go up and practice. And I was right by the park. I mean, we lived right by the school. So I had the parking lot, like with the lines, like all set out. And so I got like sticks out of the playground and used those instead of bean bags. And like, just kind of did it until I figured out how you had to sort of start slowing down before you hit the line. So you like just put your foot on the line and then could like change directions quickly. And I sorted it. That is the story.
That's
kind
awesome.
of dorky, but I got a signed letter. I think Bill Clinton signed it. I don't know. Anyways.
You got the little patch with the eagle on it.
Yes, eagle patch. And later, I think there was a pin. Maybe the second year there was a pin.
Oh
Anyways.
I have such envy for people whose minds work that way, even from the time they were a child, to be like, I need to crack this nut, because I'm more in the vein of like,
Yeah. Ruby said in chat, definitely didn't train for that test unless you count watching lots of TV and drinking Kool-Aid.
Awesome.
So Carla, that takes us to fifth grade, where you're already into getting into the granularity of high performance on your own as a fifth grader.
Yeah.
So from there, where did you go?
All right. So yes, many, many years later. I think this point that Lori brought up about like liking to figure things out or looking at things and saying, how do you figure that out? I think has always been a piece of it. I liked this idea of like, things are solvable, you know, like I might not know how to solve them, but they're solvable. And like, when you have that perspective, like that mindset, like so much opens up to you. And so I think that's why I liked math and science. I was like, I don't understand how English and history work. I'm not sure. I'm just going to stay out of that. And so I ended up, but I really like people, and I was always really socially inclined. I was always kind of looking around, seeing like, well, what is everybody else doing? Like, how are they good at that thing? Why are they good at that thing? My husband made a joke at the lunch table today. I was like eating some takeout that I had like remastered, and I was like, this takeout, these noodles are so good because, and then I was like listing off all the things about the noodles of like why it works. And I'm not a foodie. I'm like I'm not a chefy person. And he's like, you're trying to say like why this noodle dish is high performing, are you? Like, yes.
He's like, do you ever turn it off, Carla?
Basically, no, I don't. And, but in a really positive way, like it's all about like, oh, what's working about that thing?
I love, that's what I love. That's what I love. Yeah.
And it's not like, cause you could imagine, oh goodness, like walking around saying what's wrong with everything all the time would be a really crappy way to be.
I'm really good friends with that guy. Man, it's exhausting just talking to him.
Okay. So like fast forward, I like people, I like math, I like science. I'm like, okay, I think a doctor would be a good thing to do. Like there's a lot of the things I like in that. So I like work on that. I have a friend who tells me, hey, Carla, did you know that they actually have these dual degree programs? I'm like, no, tell me more. And they're like, well, they pay for you to go and they pay you money while you go, and you have to get 2 degrees. But when you're done, like you have no debt, and you have a science degree and you have an MD. And I thought, that is so good for so many reasons, because I really like combining disciplines. So I've always thought that when you get 2 people who are experts at different things in a room together, and if they're empathetic, if they can actually kind of communicate and be curious about each other, that you can learn so much. And I think a lot of our innovations come from that. So dual degree program,
you thought there's a lot of upside here, right? And they're going to pay me and I don't have any debt. Did you consider how hard it might be?
I actually thought like, well, I'll figure that out. I mean, and I know I'm not normal in that regard. I think the part that worried me the most was like, well, they're going to pay me. I have a job. That problem is solved. Everything else is figure outable. Like I will not be unemployed.
So the flow of that program was interesting too. How did that work?
Oh, it's like a double stuffed Oreo. So you have like 2 years of med school. Then they drag you out. You go into a lab, which is nothing like med school, and you do a PhD, and you have to do unstructured problem solving. And then they throw you back. So that's like 4 or 5 years. Then they throw you back into med school for 2 years, and you are totally out of your element. You've been gone from med school. It was the worst.
Oh,
I can tell you. But So you go back into your clinical years. So you're in a hospital actually trying to you're a med student, so you're not like treating the patients, but you kind of follow along. And so that's how the program is set up. But I think I don't want to take everyone's time too much on this story, but we basically like finished that. I went into surgery with the idea of like combining then being a surgeon. And I did that because again, like I really like understanding like how do you have to think in really high performing environments, like where the stakes are high. How do people do that? And then one of the places that I really saw that happening was like with surgeons, because it's so binary what you're doing. Like you're going to cut someone open or you're not. And based on that decision, like, and deciding to not operate is as much a decision as deciding to operate. And I mean, this comes up all the time, I think, in our workplaces. Like I know we're talking about medicine right now, but I think all of us probably can think of times where we're like, there's an important decision and ignoring the decision is a decision.
That's right.
So I really liked how surgeons thought, and I saw that they were people who really had to like see their choice, own their choice, and then improve their choice, like take responsibility if it didn't go well. And I think that is a characteristic that comes up like in good leaders a lot. So now like bringing this kind of like, let's take this out of medicine and really into saying, yeah, that's something that can be really important in leadership for teams, and a skill that we learn and develop as we're trying to like develop people through their careers. How can we help them like see and own and ultimately like improve the choices they're making, how they're thinking about things.
I love it. So you were in surgical residency and you decided to not do that. What was the pivot out of medicine for you and into something else?
You know, I think a big piece of it, and I don't know if this will resonate, but I think a lot about how do you get great performance out of people, like real people. We're not robots. And there was so much that was really challenging in the medical system about how to do that. And the truth is, I think this has maybe come about even more broadly during the pandemic, as we see like all the burnout, everything people are doing, you know, the back-to-back meetings, like the physical hardship, literally sitting in front of a computer for that long, like looking at a camera. I think the short story is that there were lots of things that were fascinating about it, but there was also a lot that was constraining enough. And where I saw that there was overfocus on one piece of performance, like the actual technique, some of the medical parts, and very little attention paid and really little resources for, how do you get great performance out of human beings? And I can tell you, it is not like having no sleep, having teams where kind of hierarchically, like people were not very empathetic to each other. I did not see, I think a lot of empathy I think a lot of people come in empathetic, but I could see that like what I might be 10 years down the road.
The system beats it out of them.
Well, I thought for me to practice medicine the way I want to practice medicine, I will burn myself out. Like I will be a little ash pile at the end. And that was a hard thing. I loved working with patients. Like my team often was like, "Ooh, the family's upset. Send Carla in there." Like I'm like the smallest person on the team. I am the youngest, least experienced, and they're like, "Oh, we send Carla in to talk to the family." And I was like, "Okay, enough of that." It was a very difficult decision, and but I think we have to say, what is going to most develop our strengths and our skills, and where can we apply those in the best way? And it became very clear to me that I loved high performance. That wasn't going away. I loved working with people, and I really liked applying stuff so everyone can use it, not being an academic. And so I know for all the education, maybe it's ironic, but I'm like, I don't want to be there. Like that was really good training for me. And I really want to work with people and do stuff in the real world. So that was the beginning of that pivot.
Fantastic. So we've learned a little bit about your mindset and your focus and some of your proclivities around math and science and this bias towards high performance dating back to shuttle run practice in 5th grade. You have landed in this space called performance science. That sounds awesome. What is it? I would call it a multidisciplinary field that more or less gets ideas from like
the business schools and thinkers about strategy and psychology, and also like the productivity movement. Anyone who's come up with like this time hack or this thing, make all your lunches on Monday. I don't know, all of those things kind of contribute. So it's got a lot of range. But I think of it as all the ideas that contribute towards how we as human beings do our best work, how we improve, how we can get the most impact from basically like the time and energy and bandwidth we have to give. And so that's how I think about it broadly. But I really, to make it make more sense to my clients, and also when I'm talking about it, in my mind, I think about it in 3 big buckets.
Okay.
So I think there are ideas related to strategy and the idea of prioritizing, of saying, what are really, of all the things we could be doing on whatever it is we're working on, like what is really most important? What's going to give us the biggest, most potent impact? So that's strategy. I think there is a lot of good ideas about execution. And within execution, I think we've got the productivity movement, which is a little bit like, how do we get like more things in smaller amounts of time?
With less budget.
I am a little snarky about the productivity movement. I'll be honest about that. And then I think the last bucket I really think about as mindset, which is kind of that part relating back to psychology. And that's really this thought that the lenses that we're looking through in our brain. I mean, we just talked about one, like in mindfulness practice, like depending on the lens you put in, you can get really different results, both of which are useful. We have determined.
Right.
But so mindset is like kind of that third bucket, kind of the psychological implications. How do we motivate a team? How do we have people feel engaged? A lot of that I can relate back to mindset. So that's how I think of it, like broadly, and how I organize it in my head.
That's fantastic. The concept has been intriguing to me since I learned who you were and what you were doing. Mindset is such an important thing. And it's funny, every time somebody says it, I can't help myself but think about the Carol Dweck book that everybody read a few years ago. And this notion of a growth mindset. And, we do coaching here at SkyTeam, and I've worked with a lot of leaders who struggle with the growth mindset. The things that they did to be successful are the only patterns that they're willing to engage with, until there's some sort of transformational pivot point, right? Yeah. So mindset is hugely important. When you're thinking about these 3 big buckets and the way that you organize performance science, if thinking about our community here at the Bartender, how can we bake those concepts into what we do at work?
So it's a great question. And I often think about within those buckets that I find there's 3 really useful, more specific principles. And I think they do relate back to some things. So thinking about like avoiding burnout for teams, also thinking about engagement, like what helps employees feel engaged. And then also thinking about like development. So what are kind of the growth curves that I think relates very much to engagement? Obviously, these things are all intertwined. So I think the first principle that I like to think about is called brutal focus. And the word brutal is in front of it because I think everyone thinks right now that they are focused and that there is a lot of clarity, and actually often there still isn't. And so I put the qualifier brutal in front because I find that if it's not a little painful, you might not be focused enough. Like if you haven't had a real strong sense of FOMO, like when you've said, okay, I guess we're not going to do that thing. We're not going to do that thing. And we're going to bet instead on these things that we're going to really invest in. If you're not feeling a little bit of pain, then you may have let too many things like be on the boat, like with you as you're going. Yeah. So brutal focus to me is having clarity on 2 questions. And as I'm thinking about how this comes into work and into your work, I'm thinking, number 1, I have to imagine like, just based on what I've read and our talk ahead of time, it's like for you as professionals, these are important for you to ask yourself or like for the teams you lead. But I think they're also really helpful questions to give to leaders and to help leaders think about how are they working with their teams. They're also great for the individual team members. So for the leader to do for their team, and for the team members to ask themselves about their own careers and like what they want. So first question is, what do you want to accomplish? And that has so many layers, because I think individuals, we have an answer of like, what do I want? But often we don't let ourselves spend much time thinking about it. Or we kind of ask the question and then we're like, oh yeah, but you can't want that because that's really not feasible. And, or well, like I should want that.
Yes. All those things we're supposed to want.
And
the societal norms and obligations. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's always the snarky answer of like, yeah, it's nice to want things, which is something we say to each other.
This is why we can't have nice things, Carla.
Yeah. So, but it's a really important question to ask. And I think particularly as we are like coming out of a really hard 3 years, both for the leaders, for employees, like, and for ourselves, asking that question and practicing asking the question, because I haven't found that it's easy to just ask on a Tuesday, like, what do I want? And then my answer is like, great, well, that's got me laid out for the next 20 years. So the second question is, okay, like once I have some clarity on like, what do I want, is to ask that question of what is really most important for that? Like, what are really the drivers of that? And the reason, so this plays out in a couple different ways, but I can use the example of like a leader with their team. So this might be you guys with your teams, but it also can be helping leaders understand how to help their teams thrive and be engaged. And I find that a lot of it comes back to clarity. So, like we often think like, oh, we need to motivate them. Like we need this, we need that. And I think clarity is one of the like most like undervalued like principles of a leader. And I will tell you, like some of the best leaders that I learned from, I'll tell you their EQ might not have been the highest, but they had great clarity. And because of that, like they helped me understand, how am I going to win at this game? Like, how can I develop myself? How can I really contribute and excel? And so what I have this story of a nonprofit director I worked with, and I was working with him one-on-one, and we built a framework for him around those two questions. So both that, like, okay, what do you really want, like for your team? What do you want to have happen? And what's the goal? But often when you say goal, like sometimes some people have bad experiences with goals. So I just like the question, like, what do you want? Let's put that in as plain of language as we can. And let's try and take out really ambiguous qualifiers and put in, like, if there's a number, we'll put in a number. If there's just a more specific adjective you can use, we're going to use a more specific adjective. So we built that, and then we talked a lot and figured out what some of the priorities were. And he took that framework back to his team. And I didn't know he was going to do this, but he came back and he was like, Carla, he's like, something magical happened.
Magical?
I mean, well, I was really surprised because I had nothing to do with the team. I don't go into his workplace. Like, I just literally work with him one-on-one. And he was like, I showed the framework to the team and everyone was like, oh. And then they were like, that's my priority. Like, that's me right there. Like, my job is like, I'm delivering that for the team. And then like, so people got really motivated. And sometimes you say, well, you just need to motivate your team, like encourage them, do this and this. And so this is this amazing example of what was motivating was clarity about where are we going and what's really most important and what can you contribute to that and why do you matter? And so then his team actually took their own, like took their priority that they were a part of and wanted to make their own frameworks. And so he did some work with them to do that.
Love it.
And so it's just this example of where focus or clarity on those two questions. And it's a process. Like you don't always get the right answer and like the answer has to evolve is my point. And that's okay. But really working on that has a tremendous impact on teams is something I found.
We talk about that all the time. We'll be working with leaders. So I have a HR team and business, HR business partners that are integrated into the teams.
Yes.
And whenever we're feeling like there's confusion or there's chaos or they're stepping on toes and they're starting to get right, we just boil it down to, do you have clarity on roles and responsibilities?
Yeah.
Number one, right? Just does everybody know what they're responsible for and what their roles are and know what everybody else is?
Yeah.
Because that alone can eliminate so much wasted time and nitpicky, right? The arguments or the assumptions and that sort of thing. So I love this concept of clarity because exactly what you said, I think it's so undervalued and it's so fundamental, just get clear, communicate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think a lot of times we assume clarity.
Yeah.
Right. As leaders, we have an idea about where we want to go, and it's reasonably clear in our heads, and we assume that everybody else is right where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's always the case. I don't think it's always the case that we're as clear as we think we are.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. And this is why actually having thought partners to talk to. And I think one of the important roles, based on the HR professionals I have worked with, that role of being a thought partner to your business partners, because I think they're running the business and you are the expert at HR. But the thing is that having someone to talk to, the moment you have to put it into language out loud, you realize how unclear it is, that it's not clear up here.
Like you can't even make a coherent sentence with me about what you're talking about. Therefore, your team is so lost right now. Yeah.
But I recommend that not as an exercise in embarrassment, but actually the act of, but the act of then having an empathetic listener who is probably I think you guys are well tuned to listen for what's going to be clear to a team, what might not be clear, what are questions they might ask, having that empathetic kind of mindset. And then practicing talking it is a way to actually work towards clarity and having a really good foil. So I'm just saying this is a wonderful gift. I think that you probably are all giving your business partners every day. So
the other thing that dovetails out of that is change management. Yeah. Thinking about, okay, that direction is going to shake shit up like you're not recognizing. And so let's back up and have a plan instead of tripping into that and going, whoops.
And they're like, but Lori, it just makes sense. Everybody will get it.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
No. Wrong answer. I love that brutal focus, right?
Brutal focus.
That's the takeaway here, TCB folks. Yeah. Brutal focus when you're employing these performance science ideas into your work programs. I want to flip it, Carla, because we're like you. We all want to learn, grow, and get better. How do we use these performance science concepts to help ourselves get better? I understand you have a few tools that you use with your clients.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think one of the first things that's important to do for yourselves is to, I call it the brutal focus exercise. And I often call it the 1-3-9 tool, but I think it's fine to just be 1-3. It can be really simple. So it's where you're going to ask yourself those two questions, the what do I want? And okay, if that's what I want, what's most important? I find it's often helpful with the what do I want question to also write down the what do I want, but I don't think I can have. And the what do I feel like someone else wants me to want? And what do I really want, but I just don't know how to do it. And so I call this the magic wand question. So just say you have a magic wand, you can have whatever you want. What is it? Perfect. Yes.
You do have a magic wand.
You have a magic wand. And then ask yourself, okay, but do I really want that? But it's very helpful to kind of, also, what would someone who knows me and loves me say that I want?
That's a fantastic question.
So these are just other ways to get at it. And it's a question to ask yourself over time. So this doesn't have to be a one-time exercise, but it's kind of a nice journaling thing. You can also start with something smaller. If there's a piece of whatever is happening in your life or in your work that you're you could just choose that piece and say, what do I want in this area? And I find that's a more approachable way to go after it too. And also I recommend doing this on a Post-it. Now I have really big Post-its, but I just
going to say you have either really small hands or big Post-its there.
I just think it takes some of the pressure off than if you're in your really nice hardbound, artistic notebook. That's just me. But so then I like to do the big brain dump of like, what is everything that might be important for that, including the stuff I feel like I should do, the stuff everybody else is doing, some of that stuff. We're going to ultimately weed that out. But I just like to make a list. I find making the brain dump is the easiest way to start. And, what would a really smart person say was most important to this? Is there someone I know who is really successful at this? What did they do? What were they doing? And this is basically like what I was doing in 5th grade, because I was like looking around being like, well, how'd they get that? Or like, well, why are they so good? Anyways, but these are the kinds of questions that are really useful to just ask over and over again. Or where could I learn about that? If I'm not totally sure what's most important for that, who might be a good resource? What is a book I could read? Like I hear there's this really good book, You, Me, We, like Me, You, We. Oh, I screwed it up. I knew I was going to screw it up.
I would edit that out. I would edit that out, but I love the just owning it, right? You just stepped right in and owned that shit. So I'm leaving that in. Yes, You, Me, We. It's a great book.
Yep, there we go. Okay, I'll get to that in my next tool. All right, called Owning It. So, yes. All right. So those are some of the questions you can ask yourself. Make the big laundry list. Then what I recommend is starting to like cross stuff off that you're like, honestly, like that's kind of extraneous. That's a detail. That's in the weeds. I also think like grouping things by themes becomes really important. So saying these kind of things are related. What are they related to? And then ultimately our goal is to try and pick like, what are the 3 like biggest drivers? If you had to really like fundamentally bring it down, like if you only had 4 hours to work on it, where would you be focusing that energy? And those are then the things that I recommend building kind of I call this a 90-90-90 tool off of. And this is like how we actually get started on big stuff. So we need some strategic direction. That's what we just did. We just said, what are we thinking about? Like, where do we want to go? And then we did some strategy. I know, Post-it note strategy here. Post-it note strategy is what's really most important for that. Okay, now I've got some areas that I think are the things that would give me the biggest impact for my time investment or my money investment. So that's our strategy. We got a Post-it note strategy. Next, we have to build momentum for ourselves. And I think building momentum and a sense of self-efficacy is one of the biggest things we can teach people how to do, particularly when we're going after something that feels uncertain or that we haven't done before, or that we don't feel confident about. And
it's hard.
It is. And I think I always recommend looking at those areas, picking the smallest thing, and thinking kind of often it's helpful, like daily, weekly basis to say, what would it look like to work on that and start to compound my way towards it? So I recommend there are some things that, are kind of sprints, or you could do them in a month, but often these things are things that are going to take time. And
hence the 90-90-90.
Yeah. So the first 90 refers to the fact that like most of the time people don't get started. So if you can be in the 10% that actually starts and you pick something and just do it, don't worry if you've got it correct, like just pick something and do start. The second 90 refers to like, after that, about 90% of people don't keep going. And so like figuring out the right size thing that you can be like sustain, like you can sustain it is really important, because that's part of what's building that habit for you. And also you can set up systems to help you sustain. So if you have a peer or a supervisor or someone who can like wants to do it with you, like maybe you have
accountability buddy.
Accountability buddy can help you sustain. Sometimes you can do something like, nope, that alarm's going to go off at 5 a.m. every morning. I've got it on auto set and I took off the like off button. So
and Carla knows I'm going to get up and do it. And if I don't, I have to tell her.
Yes, exactly. So there's, sometimes you hire someone to help you, right? Yeah. Like a coach or a trainer, like these things work too. So that's second 90. Third 90 is only after you've gotten yourself going and you're just sustaining it. Don't worry about improving it until you've actually had some time to learn.
I love the taking the pressure off yourself bit.
Just do.
Just do. Yeah, because I think a lot of us, once we achieve something, there's this implicit expectation that we're just going to be really good at it. And it may be new. And if it's new, chances are I'm going to screw it up, and that's okay.
Yeah. Or feeling like you have to, like, your learning curve has to like immediately go like this. And I find there's so much good stuff that's happening in no, just keep doing what you're doing. And like, you can add something later, or you can, you may over time learn some nuances of things and then be like, I'm actually going to do this thing different. But if you start that right away, I find that's one of the biggest like habit killers out there.
You know, as a tiny habits certified coach, right? A lot of the things that you're saying here kind of resonate with BJ Fogg's work and what he does, just about getting those habits instantiated and making them patterns. Chunking it down to these little things and giving yourself the space to do that is such a fantastic way to start.
I just wanted to mention something that you said about self-efficacy. And I did some research for a presentation that I gave around burnout. And one of the studies found that one of the sort of things to do for yourself to help counteract, right? Not waiting for somebody else to make things awesome, but what can I take control of if I'm dealing with burnout, and finding something that I can control, right? Something that I know I'm doing, I'm making the choices about this, I'm moving this forward, that can actually counteract experiences of burnout pretty significantly. So I just, because you'd mentioned that, you know, as another tie into some of these things, I found that to be, you know,
that's
what I learned. Yeah.
A great tie-on, and I totally agree.
Yeah.
I love it. So we've got the brutal focus exercise, or the 139. We've got the 90, 90, 90. That's really good stuff. Is there anything else you would add to that list for our listeners today?
One more thing. And I think this also helps with, it helps with growth and development. It also helps with burnout. I like to think about running good experiments. So I think, and
because of course you do, scientist.
I know, such a geek. I think it flows as a really great kind of mindset adjunct to these two tools we just talked about. And because inevitably at multiple moments when you're doing this, you're going to run into like, well, I don't know. And so I love having the question, and I actually call it kind of having like an experimental like mindset. And that is because when we picture something as running an experiment, like in science, we don't be like, oh, your hypothesis wasn't correct. Like you were wrong. Like we're like, oh no, the best experiments were built so that you would learn something either way. And if you're not running experiments that way, like that wasn't good. And my advisor definitely was like good at teaching me that. So, I love thinking about things as running experiments because it puts us in a learning mindset versus a right or wrong mindset. And it gives us room to try stuff and think about it. And my 3 parts of, if you're going to run an experiment and you want to approach something this way, I have sort of 3 parts of it. Number 1, run experiments for things where it really matters, like what you want to learn. Like sometimes you just need to decide to just do something, but like try to learn something that like really matters, just to conserve your time and energy. Number 2, I think it's always great to make sure that the upside outweighs the downside. And because then you're not going to be stressed about it. If you feel you're taking too big a risk, it kind of takes the joy and the benefit out of the experimental mindset. And then the last thing is, I think it's always good to think about like, how will I know if it's working? How do I set this up so I can actually interpret the results of it? So I just think I think it's fun. Now I'm a scientist and I love that stuff. So, but to me, it actually puts me in a mindset of like all this uncertainty that I might see. I'm like, oh, that becomes way more fun versus it's uncertain and I'm probably going to make the wrong choice.
Whoops. Awesome. Well, thank you, Carla. I want to open it up to questions because I know you've got a hard stop at top of the hour. But before we do that, can you let everybody know how they find you if they want to learn more about you, about Thaxa, about performance science in general?
Happy to. So I am on LinkedIn, Carla-Fowler, and you can follow me there. I post podcast conversations that I'm a part of are going up there, and probably more things in the future. And feel free, drop me a note. It's really helpful for me to like have context of where people are coming from. So I always really appreciate that.
Yeah, just tell her that it was the best podcast she was ever on. That's how you know her.
I will know, and I will know it was this one. Awesome. And then my website is at Thaxa.com. That's Thaxa. And that's my coaching website for my practice. And I am always I'm always looking for new clients, and excited to have conversations with people about that. So if your interest is kind of more in that realm, that's a great place to find me. And probably will be more stuff on there in the future as well. So
awesome. All right, folks, who has questions for Carla and performance science?
I do. I
know Ruby does. Like, I know she's been waiting for this moment.
I love all of this. I just so appreciate the work you do in the world, Carla. And I'm thinking about this from a coaching perspective. What's your kind of starting point for people who have a real fear of failure or that perfection mindset? Because I feel like that's a common obstacle where people are scared of making a mistake. And it kind of gets to what you were just talking about. But I was just wondering, like, how do you crack that door open with them and start getting them into that growth, like experimental, curious mindset?
Yeah. No, this is a great question. And it's obviously a little different for every person, but here's some things that I think often work. I actually have found the running an experiment resonates a lot. I don't know if it's because people are like, ooh, science. I don't know.
Like, she's smart.
I don't know. Like, how do but I do think it actually is a mindset shift. And we know when we frame words differently, we can like have big impacts with what seems like a small intervention, right? That's one thing. The other thing is I often give some other points of view to like sometimes say, hey, well, I ask a lot about like, how does it feel to be being the way like you feel like you need to be? Like, is it fun? Is it,
or does it suck?
Like, well, what feels good about it? What doesn't feel good about it? Like what are some of the costs of that? So that's often a good dialogue. I think a last dialogue that's helpful, and it has worked really well for me because I absolutely have those tendencies. I continually work against those, is I think about how fast can I go? Because I get a certain amount of time on the earth. And when I say fast, I don't mean like that I want to sprint all the time, but it's like how much that is like meaningful and that I'm present for, can I be a part of in the time that I have? And what I've realized is that, and I'll just speak for myself, but when I'm trying to do things at like the 99th percentile, that and holding on to them too tightly, that actually I get stuck trying to master something when it is time to move on to the next thing. Like I'm good enough at that thing and it is time to move forwards and experience something new. But the pace we can move at and our experience of like new achievements, new growth of ourselves can get really stagnated by that. And sometimes when we can like even drawing the visual of it can really help like get it in people's brains. So like you could even say, draw the picture of what it feels like your trajectory looks like right now. And draw a picture of like what would seem better and what might that drawing represent. So there's some interesting things in there.
I could spend all evening talking about this stuff.
Yes.
I want to be respectful of your commitments, Carla, because I know you have 2 minutes. Thank you so much for being here today. Big ups for Carla. Thank you so much. If you have a question that you didn't get to ask, Carla, is it okay if they just connect with you on LinkedIn or email?
I'd love that. That'd be great. Okay. Yes. And
awesome.
This has been so fun. I really appreciate the group. Thank you for your time. It's fun to be a part of this.
I think we're going to have a part 2. So let's figure that out. Let's get together again in the new year and let's go a little bit deeper because I think there's a lot more to uncover here. Carla, you've been awesome. I know you need to go when you need to go. In the meantime, we're going to do our funny things, our good feels and our cocktails. Funny thing number 1 today, dog brings stick inside. Me, no, that belongs outside. Me at Christmas time brings entire tree inside. Dog, what the actual shit is this? Funny thing number 2, a hero. Man who was fired for refusing to participate in after-work drinks and team building activities wins the legal right not to be fun at work.
He got fired?
And then he sued, and he now has the legal right to not be the fun guy. Funny thing number 3, no matter how small you try to make that unsubscribe at the bottom of an email, I will
Yes.
I think we can all relate. This one is a World Cup funny. I've been super into the World Cup and watching it. I watched today. This made me laugh. Can't be a USA fan when we play another country. It's too easy to own us. You try to trash talk a British guy and he says like, "Oi, go pay your deductible, mate." It's over at that point.
That's funny.
And if any of you saw the viral photo of Elon Musk's nightstand with his 4 cans of caffeine-free Diet Coke, really caffeine-free Diet Coke, his cosplay gun with no trigger, somebody one-upped him here. You ready? This is my bedside table.
Whoa.
George Costanza.
Ruby and I did a session recently, and there was a guy in there, and Ruby, we got out of the session, and she was like, "That dude is George Costanza."
Literally. Literally.
And then she reminded me, and I was like, "Oh, he is George Costanza." My favorite funny thing today, Volkswagen Italy, please never change your Instagram handle. Somebody read that word for me at the top of the...
Oh.
It's not Volkswagen Italia. It's Volkswagen Italia, everybody. Today's Good Feel story is all about relationships.
There are few things in life like the power of friendship. They can bring you joy in the best of times and help you heal during the difficult ones. Here's CBS's Steve Hartman on the road.
64-year-old Betty Strang of Greenfield, Wisconsin is getting ready for an anniversary. The anniversary of a terrible day she can neither forget nor remember.
I don't remember anything from that day.
1 year would imply. Steve Hartman, CBS News.
Oh, Steve Hartman, you kill me, my friend.
Feisty women.
The dancing grannies. I loved it. Today's semi-quarantine cocktail is You're a Mean One. It's a riff on a cocktail called The Grinch, which when Lori's kids said they were going to watch it, I was like, that is perfect.
That's amazing.
You're going to need 1 Marathon Florida police officer, a little bit of Midori liquor. Remember those Midori cocktails when you were in college? You're like, oh, this is really sweet. I could drink a lot of this and then feel really terrible tomorrow. You're going to need a radar speed trap, an ounce of clear rum, a school zone, some Sprite or 7-Up. And if you were driving 5 miles or less above the speed limit in that school zone, you got a choice. You need a maraschino cherry. Your choice was you can get a ticket or you can get an onion presented by the Grinch. He would walk up to your car and tell you did a bad thing and gave you an onion. And some people ate the onion like an apple right there in front of the Grinch. That's weird. Happy holidays, everybody. So next week, we're pretty much off, but I think I want to come here and hang out with anybody that wants to hang out. We won't record the show, but maybe we'll play Quiplash. Maybe we'll, right? I don't know. Maybe we'll be confronted with another question from somebody like Laurel that Lori has to answer that's really uncomfortable in a work context. Laurel doesn't remember, but Lori does. And Laurel, if you come next week, we'll remind you of exactly what that was. You guys, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks to Carla. Thanks to Carla Fowler. She was amazing. I can't wait to continue that conversation. If you don't make it next week, happy holidays, and we will see you in 2023. Peace out.
Yay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you had a good time and learned a thing or two at today's happy hour, please share it with your friends. If you want to join our tribe, head on over to skyeteam.cloud/TCB or email us at info@skyeteam.com. That's SKYE team.com. Thanks again, and remember, you've always got friends at the Corporate Bartender.